this is the impact that 75 had on my own 9 dimensions of wealth. Physically, it was probably fair to say that I was able to get into the best shape of my life. From working out each day, I was able to, craft a pretty decent physique, I thought, that enabled me to be pretty adaptable to whatever challenge or anything that was coming my way. It was the most mobile I've been, it was the most flexible, probably the most strong I've been in the strength training that I was doing, the most, in cardiovascular endurance that I've been able to kind of develop as well. Like, because I found that even in some of the footy practice games and just my endurance to allow me to go all 4 quarters was phenomenal. And then also just even looking at the aspects of, half marathon and the full marathon. Definitely did not have enough prep for the full marathon. And knowing that next time, if I do want to do a marathon down the track, I'll use more load. I had developed the strength needed to at least allow me to do it. And, had the mental capacity to push forward through that. But yeah, I was in pretty good nick by the end of 75 hard for sure. Mentally, it's probably the most dialed in I had ever been. I had a very clear vision on what I was doing, where I was going, and I felt that having clarity on things actually brings that sense of ease to me, because I've had experiences in the past where I've had, aspects of uncertainty. I didn't know where I was going or even who I was as a person. And so I had like that constant doubt and fear on having to have everything figured out. But whereas I knew, and I had a pretty clear vision on, the 75 hard challenge as itself and what I was signed up for. So there was like the knowing, but also the unknowing in like what I was doing each day and where I was going. It's not to say that I didn't have any mentally challenging days throughout it. Of course I did. Like, there were days where I could not be fucked, getting up and doing some of the challenges and working each day. But having to develop the mental capacity to deal with them in a more constructive way, I think is, looking back, is a really kind of powerful thing that I was able to develop. And especially doing so with that consistency and accountability aspect really helped me to enhance and take my resilience, which I thought was already at a pretty good level, as well as my adaptability to a whole new level. So that was really cool to look at. Emotionally, I do feel very fulfilled on what I've been able to achieve and what I was able to do to the best of my ability. However, during the course of the challenge itself, it was definitely a roller coaster, because there was a lot of times where I had, I'd felt kind of angry or sad because it would be like 9 p.m. and I hadn't read my book yet, and I was like, oh fuck, like I got to like do my 10 pages, or I couldn't be fucked doing a workout, and so I was just like quite frustrated in the things that I had to do, or like the aspect of juggling work and everything. It was actually, it got a bit overwhelming at times for sure, and that definitely played with my emotions. But looking back now, it was definitely an opportunity for me to practice that aspect of emotional regulation, which I reference time and time again in my friends, my family, and also school workshops as well. I think it's a pretty underrated characteristic or trait that needs a lot of practice. Although like even nowadays, I think it's more important than ever, being able to like step back, gain a pretty wider perspective on like where you are at with your emotions, being aware of them, and then being able to kind of do what you need to manage them in a pretty effective and more constructive way, rather than just letting your emotions go haywire, and which can lead you to doing and acting in out in some certain ways which sometimes you're not always proud of. That happens. It's normal, but it's another thing that you can keep on learning from as you go. And I definitely wanted to mention and be really transparent with my emotions on this side of things. Like with the 75 hard, I'll talk about it in a second as well when it comes to my social dimension, but I did feel quite isolated at times, especially when it comes to the Friday, Saturday, Sunday times, because I would see my friends out, and I would appreciate invites and stuff like that, but I definitely felt a little that aspect of loneliness here and there. Played with my emotions a little bit, but I knew that like I had to take a step back there and think of the bigger picture. Like, no, I actually need the rest to go again tomorrow. So that's what kind of like helped me to regulate my emotion there. Intellectually, I think I'd actually be up there with my most growth out of the dimensions. As each day I was able to challenge my brain with something new and something exciting, which, altering my brain chemistry in a way like that every day, and just like really leaning into doing things anyway, I think has really like influenced my brain chemistry in a way for the better. Ultimately, allowed me to grow and adapt in a way to like want to do more challenging things that's going to help me like become more adaptable in any scenario and in any environment as well. My environmental wealth is definitely up there as well with intellectual, as I was really able to put myself in environments that would support my day to day. This has not only meant, removing myself from environments or spending less time in environments that didn't serve me, but actually like spending more time in environments that like do. So whether it is like going to cold nips on a Wednesday morning and getting my social aspect there and being surrounded by like-minded individuals who are there to get out of their comfort zone as well, meet new people and start their day on the same note. So Wednesday mornings were a hit there in terms of my environment, but also things like footy training as well. That was a really good environment adjustment as well. Restfully, this is actually quite simple when you think about it, because I'm sure that you can imagine after doing 2 45-minute workouts a day and doing some form of random challenge, I was pretty tired. So by the time that I hit the hay at the end of the day, I was getting some of the best quality sleep I'd got in a while, which is quite nice. Of course, I would still wake up the next day, sometimes pretty tired, but knowing that I got most of the time pretty solid 8 hours of restful sleep, so I was able to recover and feel fresh enough to go again the next day. Financially, to be frank, this is probably the dimension that kind of struggled the most, to be honest, because whilst doing the whole challenge, I was actually quite experimenting with a new pathway of work where I was working for myself, working remotely at home for a few different offers in terms of the sales and marketing space. So sometimes I wasn't earning as much money that I had been in the past, but I was willing to kind of make that sacrifice. I was willing to, help me gain the experience needed to actually break out in that industry. And whether it is making content or whether it is the sales aspect of things, I'm still quite new to it. And, knowing that Rome wasn't built in a day. So just knowing that what I'm doing now and the position I'm in now, that I'm just setting the foundations for me to, grow into the future and hopefully make this a viable aspect for me moving forward. And socially, as I mentioned before, definitely took a hit, but it was a sacrifice that I was willing to make, knowing that I had the goal in mind of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with 75 hard, and knowing that if my social life kind of has to take a hit, then I got to do what I got to do. My friends and family were ultimately really supportive in that, and did their best at times when suiting to my availability as well, whether I want to go get coffee instead of going out to the bar and getting a drink, just making those small adjustments so I could still get that social aspect and the aspect of cold nips as well. That was super solid in terms of getting my social interactions there as well. Spiritually, I think I'm almost more in tune with my spirituality than before starting the challenge, as I had to really use it and lean into it to slow myself down in a form of recovery, because each day I was in a state of high functioning and go, needing to do this and this. And so being able to do things like yoga and mobility and stretching, focusing on my breath, leaning into my spirituality really allowed me to slow down and actually bring in that kind of deep breath of fresh air, which allowed me to kind of go day by day. And then lastly, being diet, it was the cleanest that I've ever ate before, and I actually really enjoyed it. I had my structured meals throughout the day. You would have seen it from the post. Breakfast, 3 hard-boiled eggs in the morning, kimchi, avo, snacks, smoothies as needed for morning tea, lunch being my yogurt bowls, dinner being some form of beef, chicken, fish, roast veggies most of the time, and being pretty clean, or not actually having any cheat meals and things like that. So that was super clean, super dialed in, and I actually really enjoyed it. Having just gone through the Easter period as well, it was nice to kind of see the fam and have some meals were there, and it's didn't have any restrictions. It had a couple more carbs and loaded up on things like lasagna and a couple of different of desserts and things like that. So it was nice to have that back, because I'm a little bit of a sweet tooth, but knowing that I had the diet to help me sustain the challenge duration, which not only just aided my recovery and aided in the physique that I was able to build, but also impacting sleep and the aspect of your gut health as well. And lastly, what would I do differently? I'm actually not too sure. If I were to do it again, whether it's next year, I probably won't do the challenge aspect of it additionally, but I might do something similar. I think it almost is good to add something on to the 75 hard aspect, so that you don't have that monotonous day by day, doing the same thing, because then that actually contributes to it becoming really hard. If you can, find something to add on to it that's unique to you and that's going to help you keep you accountable and keep it exciting and keep it a bit spicy, I think that's something to keep in mind and incorporate to help you along your journey. So I wouldn't add too much differently to my experience. Absolutely loved it. And I hope that's given you a bit more insight into how it's really impacted me, my 9 dimensions, and helped me grow in such a short but also long amount of time and really set myself up for whatever's next. So thanks for tuning in for this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.